The Galactic Empire's outer patrol line detected the incoming vessels long before anyone understood what they were. Their scanners mapped silhouettes that didn't match any known faction, shapes too sharp and too quiet, gliding through the void with no emissions that a standard sensor array could interpret. Imperial officers assumed they were outdated civilian hulls or unregistered traders wandering into restricted territory. Their confidence held firm. No unknown visitor had ever posed a challenge to an empire that spanned thousands of systems. The bridge crew moved with casual arrogance as they prepared the standard broadcast demanding identification. The first contact signal arrived with an unexpected softness. A human voice spoke with steady composure, delivering a polite introduction and requesting safe passage. The tone carried none of the trembling deference Imperial officers expected from border trespassers. Instead, it held a calmness that irritated the fleet commander, who believed respect meant submission. His staff exchanged annoyed glances when they replayed the transmission to verify the lack of fear. That irritation hardened when someone pointed out faint laughter in the background, quiet, relaxed, as if the humans found the Empire's warning protocols amusing. Offense replaced curiosity. The fleet commander issued an ultimatum demanding immediate surrender for vessel inspection. He expected panic or negotiation. Instead, he received a simple acknowledgement from the Terran commander, delivered with the same unfazed tone, hinting at amusement but lacking any visible aggression. The absence of fear unsettled the officers more than any open challenge could have. They wondered if the foreigners didn't understand the threat or believed it irrelevant. Imperial doctrine required swift enforcement of borders, so the commander authorized a controlled weapons lock. Dozens of cruisers shifted into firing alignment, their energy projectors charging as targeting nodes painted the Terran hulls. Yet the foreign ships remained motionless, almost indifferent. They didn't maneuver, raise shields, or alter formation. They simply existed in a silent stance that suggested complete confidence. Imperial technicians double-checked readings, confused by the absence of power fluctuations or defensive signatures. The Terran vessels looked inert, but instinct told the crew they were anything but. The Empire attempted intimidation, enlarging the broadcast and amplifying their threat posture. They declared that refusal to comply would result in immediate measures. The human reply arrived with a faint undertone of laughter again, which only deepened the tension. The Terran commander responded with a respectful tone, pointing out that they had violated no treaty and meant no harm. Yet the calmness sounded far too certain, as though they knew something the Empire didn't. The Empire fired a small warning burst intended to scorch hull plating and force compliance. The moment the blast hit, scanners overloaded with static. The energy simply vanished upon contact. No explosion. No deflection. No shield shimmer. It was as if the Terran materials swallowed the attack whole. Officers scrambled for recalibration, but every diagnostic returned nonsense. Hull readings dropped to zero, then spiked beyond measurement, rendering systems blind. The commander demanded updated visuals, only to see the Terran ships unchanged, floating as though nothing had occurred. Confusion replaced arrogance across the fleet. The Empire prided itself on knowing every technology worth considering, yet these vessels behaved in ways no database could explain. Attempts to refine scans produced only more errors. Some readings even reported the ships in multiple positions at once. Engineers insisted the sensor ghosts were impossible. Tactical staff argued that foreign stealth systems couldn't override Imperial military sensors this completely. The Terran commander transmitted again, voice steady and almost sympathetic, advising the Empire not to escalate further. His composure felt like a direct insult. The faint background laughter wasn't mocking, it was casual, like someone who didn't consider the situation dangerous. That tone carried more weight than any threat could, whispering a truth the Empire had never confronted. These ships weren't intimidated because they had no reason to be. The fleet commander, unwilling to appear weak, ordered all vessels to advance and prepare a more forceful demonstration. But hesitation had already spread through the ranks. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, questioning silently whether this confrontation was a mistake. Everything about these strangers contradicted the Empire's expectations. Their silence, Their immobility, their effortless dismissal of a warning strike, every detail signaled a force more dangerous than any Empire fleet had ever faced. By the time the Imperial formation tightened around them, the fleet understood one thing clearly: these humans weren't here by accident, and they weren't the harmless newcomers they had expected. The entire battle line felt the shift, the slow realization that the first contact had already slipped out of their control. Imperial fire control officers initiated the next barrage the moment authorization came through, confident sheer volume would force the foreign vessels to react. Salvos of plasma bolts, kinetic penetrators, and ion disruptors filled the void, converging on the clustered Terran ships. But the moment the weapons struck, the same impossible phenomenon occurred. The attacks dissolved without generating heat, recoil, or radiation. Tactical screens scrambled again, flickering through contradictory reports. Some displayed the Terran vessels as translucent, others showed them as solid objects absorbing absurd amounts of energy without registering damage. Engineers argued loudly over the impossibility of the readings, but no one could explain what they were witnessing. While the Empire attempted to reorient their sensors, the Terran commander issued a soft advisory that the continued exchange was unnecessary. His tone remained measured, not mocking, yet carried a weight that deepened the unease spreading through the ranks. The relaxed certainty in his voice suggested he was addressing a problem, not an opponent. The faint amusement behind each word contrasted sharply with the Empire's growing anxiety, and that contrast unsettled officers more than any threat could have. Scatter pulses rippled through the Imperial formation as they tried new scanning patterns. Crew members gasped when the foreign ships appeared in multiple places across the tactical grid, each position carrying identical mass signatures. The notion of simultaneous locations directly contradicted established physics, but their instruments confirmed it repeatedly. Some believed the humans were projecting decoys, others suspected sensor corruption. Neither explanation accounted for why the readings grew more stable rather than collapsing. The Terran vessels behaved like objects unconstrained by conventional detection, shifting between map points with deliberate rhythm. Without firing a shot, the Terrans disabled the nearest Imperial cruiser. A narrow beam of invisible energy crossed the void, flickering once. Every system aboard the Imperial ship blinked out simultaneously. Power died, weapons shut down, engines froze, and emergency backups refused to activate. The ship drifted with the helplessness of a dead hull. Bridge crews panicked, unable to reboot anything. The disabling strike left no scorch marks, no structural damage, and no indication of what had occurred. It was clean, efficient, and absolute. The Empire's fleet commander demanded to know what technology could silence an entire warship without inflicting physical harm. His calm officers attempted to isolate the source, but the Terran signature patterns were unlike anything catalogued. Instead of identifiable frequency spikes, the interference resembled controlled silence, a deliberate removal of detectable energy rather than an emission. The closest descriptor engineers offered was subtractive resonance, a concept long dismissed as theoretical nonsense. As more Imperial data feeds collapsed, Terran ships executed maneuvers so precise they looked predictive rather than reactive. Every Imperial formation shift, every flanking attempt, every reinforcement movement was countered before completion. Terran positioning left no exploitable angles. They seemed to anticipate decisions the moment they formed. Officers whispered that the humans were reading encrypted command channels, but intelligence teams confirmed transmissions were uncompromised. Another Imperial vessel went dark as its systems collapsed under a pinpoint Terran pulse. Panic spread through bridge crews as they realized their weapons couldn't track the Terran ships, let alone retaliate effectively. Missiles veered off course. Energy bolts dissipated prematurely. Targeting algorithms looped endlessly, unable to maintain locks. Every failure chipped away at the belief that the Empire held technological superiority over all known species. The Terran commander spoke again, calmly advising the Empire to disengage before further losses occurred. His voice carried no triumph or aggression, yet the underlying confidence suggested he was extending a courtesy rather than issuing a warning. Imperial officers struggled to hide their fear, secretly hoping the humans wouldn't escalate. The realization that the newcomers could dismantle an entire fleet without casualties forced many to reevaluate assumptions about humanity's capabilities. Reinforcement signals flashed across the command grid as the Empire summoned additional battle groups, but even before they arrived, the fleet sensed the truth. These humans possessed technology and tactical control far beyond anything the Empire had encountered. Their laughter wasn't bravado. It was the sound of a force so prepared and so far ahead that threats felt irrelevant to them. By the time the reinforcements entered system space, the first wave of Imperial ships drifted helplessly, silent evidence that the Empire's initial arrogance had led them into a confrontation they never understood. Reinforcement signatures flared across the system as multiple Imperial battlegroups emerged from folded space, their arrival shaking the confidence of the remaining officers who clung to the belief that overwhelming numbers would compensate for earlier failures. Massive dreadnoughts, armored destroyer wings, and elite strike cruisers formed a wide encirclement around the Terran fleet. The Empire's commander projected a final threat, his voice layered with synthetic amplification meant to intimidate. He demanded unconditional submission and threatened annihilation if the humans refused. His attempt at dominance fractured the moment the Terran reply arrived. The human commander answered with a calm tone that carried unmistakable amusement, a quiet laugh in the background that slipped through the transmission and pierced the Empire's facade of control. Terran vessels shifted in formation for the first time since the confrontation began. Their hulls darkened, surfaces rippling like metal reacting to heat despite no detectable energy forming around them. Their signatures vanished entirely, leaving not a trace for Imperial sensors to latch onto. It was as though space had swallowed them. Panic swept across the Empire's tactical stations as every readout struggled to reconcile the disappearance. Before the Empire could recover, the Terran ships reappeared in new positions, inside Imperial formations that had been secure seconds earlier. Microfold transitions should have torn hulls apart, yet Terran vessels executed them with pinpoint accuracy. Imperial ships collided in confusion, forced to alter courses abruptly to avoid catastrophic friendly impacts. Before commands could stabilize the lines, Terran kinetic projectiles were already in motion. Small, dense rods launched without visible flash or recoil, slipping past shields designed to repel high-energy attacks. These rods punched through dreadnought plating with surgical holes, compromising reactors, severing command pathways, and crippling weapons arrays. Detonations followed, rippling through the Imperial formation as massive vessels tumbled, shedding debris. Empire gunnery crews retaliated, firing volleys in all directions, but the Terran ships shifted unpredictably, gliding in patterns that made no strategic sense to Imperial doctrine yet provided flawless positioning for counterstrikes. Every kinetic shot the humans launched hit precisely where structural collapse would cascade through enemy systems. Their accuracy suggested complete understanding of Imperial ship architecture. The Empire realized the Terrans had mapped their vessels in real time, exploiting every vulnerability with effortless precision. As more ships fell, internal Imperial communications drowned in fear. Officers whispered that the humans operated on predictive algorithms far beyond anything known. Some believed the Terrans were reading future maneuver intentions before commands reached the fleet. Others claimed the humans were using some hybrid cognition between crew and AI. Every theory only deepened the dread. The Empire's elite destroyer wing attempted a coordinated strike, approaching at full burn in a tight spear formation. Before their weapons could lock, Terran ships folded again, reappearing behind them. Precision pulses struck simultaneously, shutting down engines and freezing entire wings in place. The destroyers drifted like statues, powerless and silent. With the backbone of the Imperial reinforcements broken, the remaining vessels attempted to retreat. Terran warships cut off escape vectors without firing lethal shots, blocking routes with perfect timing. Their posture made one truth clear: they weren't killing indiscriminately. They were demonstrating capability. Every action delivered a message. The Empire had miscalculated the scale of the force they challenged. The Terran commander opened a wide-channel broadcast, his voice steady and sharp. He stated that further aggression was unnecessary and urged the Empire to stand down. The calmness wasn't arrogance, it carried certainty backed by a demonstration no Empire fleet could counter. The Empire's crews, shaken by the loss of entire battle groups within minutes, realized their weapons were useless against an opponent who moved as if physics bent for them. The Imperial commander attempted to issue new threats, but his voice cracked mid-sentence. His officers no longer believed in victory. The Terran fleet held position around the surviving vessels without aiming a single cannon, their restraint more intimidating than any display of power. By the time the final Imperial engines powered down, every ship in the system understood the truth. Humanity had arrived with force far beyond anything the Empire had prepared to confront, and they had laughed through the entire engagement because nothing in the Empire's arsenal had ever posed a real threat to them. Imperial command struggled to regain coherence, as damaged ships floated in disorganized patterns, their crews shaken by the speed and precision of the Terran assault. Emergency channels filled with fragmented attempts at explanations, but none offered clarity. Every officer understood that continuing the fight would end the same way: instant system collapse, loss of control, and complete humiliation. The Imperial flagship finally broadcast a request for dialogue, the tone strained and hesitant, revealing more fear than authority. The Terran commander answered immediately, still composed, speaking with the same steady calmness that had unnerved the Empire since the first exchange. He stated that the Terran fleet never intended to escalate, and had attempted to avoid conflict from the start. His voice carried a sincerity that contrasted with the Empire's aggression, but beneath it remained the unshakable certainty of someone who held every advantage. That balance, peaceful words backed by overwhelming capability, forced the Empire to listen. Imperial envoys asked for an explanation of the Terran objective. The humans responded with simple clarity: exploration, expansion of knowledge, and construction of stable routes through contested space. They emphasized that they sought cooperation, not conquest. Yet there was an unmistakable edge in the message, a quiet assurance that humanity would not bow to threats. The background murmur of laughter that had appeared in earlier transmissions returned briefly, softer now, not directed at the Empire but at the absurdity of the situation. That sound reminded the Empire that all their intimidation had failed from the start. The flagship's council attempted to regain footing by asserting Imperial authority, insisting that border protocols must be respected. The Terran commander replied with a direct analysis of the Empire's governance model, highlighting its reliance on domination, forced assimilation, and suppression of dissent. He pointed out that the Empire's demand for unconditional obedience contradicted any claim of civilized negotiation. His words landed with surgical precision, striking at the foundation of Imperial identity. Empire officers tried to dispute the accusation, but the Terran fleet displayed recordings and sensor readings from subjugated frontier worlds, data collected during their approach. The Empire realized the humans had been studying them long before this confrontation. Their intelligence-gathering ability alone suggested a level of strategic preparation that dwarfed anything the Empire had encountered. The Terran commander then proposed a new arrangement. The Empire would cease forced annexation in multiple sectors, withdraw occupying fleets from key systems, and open limited diplomatic channels for joint scientific programs. In return, humanity would share limited non-military data on navigation safety, and allow supervised transit in neutral zones. The tone of the proposal was cooperative, yet firm. It was not a request, it was a balanced ultimatum shaped as a diplomatic offer. The Imperial Council rejected the terms at first, clinging to pride and tradition. Their refusal lasted only minutes. The Terran fleet replayed battle telemetry from the recent encounter, highlighting every disabled Imperial vessel, every maneuver predicted before execution, every failed tactic. The unspoken message was clear: if the humans had intended annihilation, none of the Imperial ships would still exist. Silence overtook the Imperial flagship. Officers who once boasted about the Empire's supremacy now stared at evidence proving they had been spared only because the Terrans chose restraint. That realization shattered the last remnants of arrogance. The council reconvened, voices subdued, and requested a revised version of the agreement. The Terran commander responded that the original terms remained the only acceptable foundation. His tone didn't shift. He left no room for negotiation on essential points. After internal deliberation, the Empire accepted. Their signatures appeared on the newly drafted treaty, their compliance driven by clarity, not fear of extinction, but understanding that humanity operated on principles outside imperial logic. The Terrans respected autonomy, demanded mutual respect, and wielded power as easily as breath. The Empire had no leverage against a force that laughed at fire and stood unshaken under pressure. As the ceasefire took full effect, the two fleets held position in uneasy stillness. The Empire knew it had confronted a species unlike any recorded in its long history, one that offered peace with one hand while demonstrating the ability to break empires with the other. And through every exchange, the humans had remained calm, composed, and quietly amused by a conflict they never considered threatening. Across the galaxy, shockwaves spread as Imperial channels transmitted fragmented reports of the encounter. Worlds long conditioned to believe in the Empire's unbeatable rule struggled to comprehend how an unknown species had dismantled entire battlegroups without sustaining a single casualty. In political chambers, analysts replayed the footage again and again, slowing every frame to search for weaknesses in Terran movements. None emerged. Committees tasked with maintaining the myth of Imperial dominance found themselves with nothing to counter the truth. The Empire had faced a power it couldn't intimidate, predict, or contain. As the treaty's acceptance circulated through diplomatic networks, suppressed civilizations quietly celebrated behind closed doors. For decades, they had endured imperial oversight, forced conscriptions, and cultural erasure. Now a new power had shown the Empire could be challenged and forced to concede. Rumors formed instantly. Some whispered that humans were ancient wanderers returning after ages of absence. Others claimed they were engineered by forgotten precursor species. None of the speculation mattered. What mattered was the Empire had faltered before them. The Terran fleet remained in position while final confirmations were exchanged. Their ships held formation with an ease that made them look alive, each vessel reacting to subtle gravitational shifts, as though guided by instinct rather than calculation. The Empire stationed observers at a distance, scanning every detail, recording every signature, hoping to gain insight into Terran systems. The attempts yielded almost nothing. Terran hulls produced minimal emissions, and any attempt to probe deeper triggered errors that mirrored sensor failures encountered during battle. Observers grew frustrated as even passive scanning returned unreadable noise patterns. When the last treaty stamp was transmitted, the Terran commander opened a final broadcast to every Imperial vessel present. His tone carried no resentment or triumph, only clarity. He stated that humans valued exploration and mutual respect, not subjugation. He emphasized that they sought cooperation where possible but would not allow intimidation or enforced obedience from any empire. His message wasn't a threat, it was a boundary defined with absolute certainty. The faint trace of laughter surfaced one last time, not directed at the Empire but at the irony of how a simple border encounter escalated into a lesson none of them would forget. Imperial officers listened in strained silence, aware that history had shifted. The Empire, known for crushing resistance, had been forced into dialogue. The message traveled swiftly across major hubs, where ambassadors struggled to explain how negotiations had unfolded. Some downplayed the human display of power, labeling it an isolated incident. Others privately urged caution, fearing what a full Terran battle group could accomplish if provoked. The most pragmatic among them began advocating for long-term cooperation, seeing opportunity in aligning with a species capable of ending wars before they began. The Terran fleet prepared to depart, engines humming in soundless resonance. Their vessels didn't flare with energy or broadcast departure signals. They simply shifted, bending light around their hulls as microfold drives activated. The transition created a ripple effect across space, a distortion so subtle Imperial sensors barely registered it. In seconds, the entire fleet vanished without leaving residual trails. Technicians scrambled to verify coordinates, but the Terrans had folded beyond the limits of known Imperial tracking. In the wake of their disappearance, a new quiet settled over the system. Imperial crews stared at the empty void, each processing the events in their own way. Some felt relief. Others felt humiliation. Many felt something deeper, respect edged with fear. They had met a species that held no interest in conquest yet possessed the ability to tear empires from the stars without hesitation. Across hundreds of worlds, the story spread at a pace even the Empire couldn't control. Civilians repeated it with awe, soldiers with disbelief, officials with caution. The dominant phrase circulating through every channel became a simple one. The humans laughed. To some, it sounded like confidence. To others, it was a warning. And to many oppressed minorities, it became a symbol of hope. By the time Imperial strategists convened to decide their next steps, it was already too late to contain the narrative. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as conquerors or negotiators, but as forces of nature who dismissed threats with quiet amusement and moved with capabilities beyond comprehension. Every future encounter would be shaped by this first impression. And throughout the galaxy, one question echoed in every council, embassy, and war room: if humans laugh at danger, what happens when something actually angers them?